always mix up the Adele version and the Lionel Richie song. I don't know why, but I just meld them together, and there we go. Which is why we're just gonna go straight to the book. If I remember who wrote it. The book is Entwined by Heather Dixon. It is, I think, my second time reading it, and it is a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses. And I was like, heck yeah! I love a retelling, and I particularly love a retelling of fairy tales that we don't see a lot of. I don't have fond recollections of this book for my first read. I kept mixing it up with The Treachery of Beautiful Things. Like, I couldn't remember which book was which. And okay, I think Entwined improved upon this read, but I probably got like somewhere near the middle when I started realizing why I didn't like it the first time. So it's not a terrible book. It just is relatively one-dimensional. Towards the end, I got lost. I did listen to it, and it wasn't a bad narration, but I thought the narrator was a little too soft for the main character, Azalea. She lacked a conviction and a power. The narrator did a great job with the younger sister, Bramble. She really showed personality with Bramble, but it was like Azalea was a stereotypical princess who was just supposed to be seen and not heard. She was supposed to be pretty, marry, and have babies and all this kind of stuff, but not really have a voice and an opinion. Yet at the same time, Dixon wanted to paint her that way, but after about our first chapter, she wasn't a very powerful figure. It was kind of like she was just there, and she didn't know what she was doing at all. She wasn't a leader. She wasn't a follower. She was just a conduit of sorts. Narration's not terrible, but I found myself more annoyed with Azalea because of the narration. Towards the end, because I was listening to it, I had to stop and rewind quite a few times to figure out where I was and how I got there. At some point, I just gave up. I was like, if I don't get it, I'm just not gonna get it, and I'm gonna move on, because I don't feel like wasting my time going back 30 minutes, an hour, just to figure out why we are where we are. I don't have that kind of time, and I'm not invested enough to give it that kind of time. Let's just jump into it. Azalea is the oldest of the 12 dancing princesses, although when we open, there are only 11. Her mother has been ailing for a number of years, I'm guessing. I don't know with what. At some point, I was like, maybe she was poisoned, maybe she was magicked, like it's not a natural death. We don't know what she died from, but we do learn she's pregnant. Very pregnant. But before we learn this, we see Azalea at a ball. We're learning all about how the princesses are pretty mischievous, and so there's always like a debacle. So apparently the year before they had all, because I guess they're not allowed at these balls. She's now 17, so I guess she's of age, and that's why she's allowed. But anyways, the year before, none of them were allowed to attend these balls, but they love watching the balls. They hid outside in the rose garden, and it's winter, mind you, so they fall asleep and, basically freezing to death. And I guess someone alerted the king and the queen that their daughters were missing. So everybody that had attended this ball had to go look for the princesses. It seems like they do this kind of thing a lot. And so they name all of these disastrous events or all of these exciting events. We're at the ball. Azalea, we have seen her have a moment with her mom. She goes upstairs. Mom's not in great shape. And this is the first and only indication that her mom is pregnant, and is that she places her hand on her belly. Naturally, my first visual is rounded stomach, hand on the stomach. But there's nothing that indicates that she's not just doing this because she's not feeling well. Rather, she's doing this. I think someone does say something about her being pregnant, but it's not until after this ball where Azalea has run into this guy who his dad used to be the prime minister, and then his father died, Now there's this other prime minister who I think his name is Fairweller. There were a lot of characters, and honestly, I didn't get enough of the new prime minister to care about him, except that he is handsome, but he's kind of a drip. But this guy, Mr. Bradford, is the son of the old prime minister, and apparently everybody thinks he should run for prime minister, and he doesn't want to. But we get a little foreshadowing here in which, when she stumbles across him, like, her sisters are hiding amongst the massive Christmas trees that have been set up. She has been delivering food to them because they're poor, which I never understood. Like, I do understand that just because you're royalty doesn't mean you're wealthy, but it doesn't seem like they're in a poor community. It just seems like Parliament controls their income. It controls the amount of money they have, and that was never explained. However, at this Christmas ball, every year, this Christmas Eve ball, the Parliament bestows upon them the money to throw it, therefore they have all these nice foods. So she is ferrying food back and forth when she runs into Mr. Bradford, and the first thing she notices is that he's really disheveled and he's bleeding. He tells her that his horse had slid on this particular bridge and he had fallen off, and she's like, yeah, in the winter my dad never uses that bridge because it freezes over and it's really dangerous. They have this little thing. He realizes why she has like a tray full of dessert. They like share this little thing. Apparently he gives her his pocket watch. I missed that, but the fact that she has his pocket watch plays into the rest of the story. And then all of a sudden Fairweller comes and he's like, party's over. Will not explain why. He and Azalea make eye contact where she gets the gist that like she should help him out, but at no point does she put pieces together that her mother has died. Her father has disappeared, and she doesn't even think, where's my dad? Except for the fact that it's a very tropish relationship in which mother is the loving, kind, sweet one who always took care of them, and His Highness had no time for them. So she has no relationship with him, which would make sense as to why I guess she wouldn't note that he's gone. They all fall asleep amongst the trees, and it's not until the next morning that she is informed that her mother has died. However, the mother has given birth. All the daughters are named after flowers, and this newest one is Lily. I understand why there are 12 characters, 12 daughters, but honestly, it was far too many sisters. Dixon tries to include all of them, but her writing was relatively juvenile, and she wasn't successful in differentiating the girls. And if she used the word crystalline one more time, this one sister, I think she's 4, I think it's Delphinium, every single time, her crystalline voice, her crystalline cry. I was like, can we please find another adjective aside from crystalline? I used to like that word, and now I'm never gonna use it in my own writing because it sounds pretentious. I really felt like she needed to, yes, establish that there are 12 sisters, and this is not a spoiler. Anybody who knows this book knows that the mystery of the 12 dancing princesses is where they go every night and why they wear holes in the bottom of their shoes. And so, okay, yes, all of them go to dance, but we don't need emphasis on more than maybe 3 sisters. I particularly like Bramble. So Bramble, and I think Bramble's next in line, because aside from there being too many girls, Dixon did not do a good job at clarifying what the age order is, except that Lily is the youngest, Azalea is the oldest, Clover is somewhere towards the top and she's the most beautiful, Bramble is somewhere towards the top and she's the most outspoken, and then we have all the little ones, and I think Ivy is like 5 or something, and she's just a little piggy. She loves to eat, and she takes every chance she can get to eat, which is how they kind of wind up in the situation in the first place. Now they have a new sister, and Lily, I guess, like, comes to live with the girls in their shared bedroom from the moment she's born. I'm like, who's taking care of this child? Who is feeding this child? At the very beginning, when Azalea was in the room with her mother had handed over her silver handkerchief, and silver is the color of royalty. She had made her swear on silver to take care of her sisters. Later on, Azalea is in her room and she sees that there is an insignia in the stone, I believe by the fireplace. There is this character called the High King Deith. So once upon a time, this realm was filled with magic. He was a bad dude. The commander general took over, like, he fought the High King Deith and he overthrew him, and he was able to rid this country of basically all of its magic. There are a couple pieces here and there that are still magic, but apparently the High King Deith, before he died, he made a blood oath, and he said, I will not die before I kill the Major General. The Major General is essentially whoever the present king is. Anyhow, Azalea stumbles across this insignia in the stone, and she presses her silver handkerchief to it, and it reveals a passageway. She goes down to this passageway with her sisters, and they discover this hidden world, this hidden pavilion. It is filled with dancers. One thing that I wish that Dixon had done more with was the idea of how when the princesses are followed, the guy, he breaks off branches from these trees from every single night that he follows, and she didn't follow that formula. She tries to include it, but she just missed a lot of marks, in my opinion. I don't mind the way that she wove her own story based off of the foundation of the original, but there were really magical parts or enchanting parts of the original story that I thought could have been useful here. They do walk through this silver forest, and they happen upon the pavilion, and they're in awe of these dancers because, I mean, I get it. They're the 12 dancing princesses. I will give it to Dixon, but I got a little bit annoyed about their fascination, their obsession with dancing. It was overwhelming, especially because it didn't necessarily feel concrete. It just felt like these girls are obsessed with dancing, and that's what their entire lives are about. They decide they got to get out of there. I think what happened was Azalea had seen this gentleman. He had done some magic, and then she thought that, like, they connected eyes. In any case, they're like, we don't need to be here. So they're on their way out, only to realize that Ivy is not with them. Ivy has hopped up into that pavilion, and she's loading her night dress with food. This, causes an upheaval, and they are prevented from leaving by that same gentleman who they name as the Keeper. He's dark and mysterious and, I guess, handsome, and Azalea feels this odd attraction to him. Initially, it was he wanted to talk to them, and then he invites them. He's like, if you want to come dance, you can. And they're so excited because during morning, they're not allowed to dance. So their first problem is that they don't have dancing shoes. And again, I know this is part of the novel, or this is part of the original story. And there's something about the original story that I never thought twice about this, in that they danced so much they wore holes in their slippers. And I think it's because it's a very surface level story. It's not meant to be long and in depth. But once you turn something like that into an actual novel, it's going to require you to fill in those blanks. I could not figure out why their slippers were so flimsy. I understand that they are poor, but the one thing that the queen had going for them was that, and I guess they wore their slippers out every single time they danced, whether it's in this magic pavilion under the sea or if it was during their everyday lives while their mom was still alive, she would have like this cobbler, the shoe cobbler, come and mend their shoes every week, and or their slippers. And then they would have new slippers delivered to them every week. Why are they so flimsy? Is it also just historical that their shoes were not meant for so much wear and tear? There's no information, but I just found myself thinking, golly, these shoes are cheap. Why did they wear out so quickly? The girls, they're dancing, and Azalea is, I don't know what to think of Azalea. I don't know if she's pretty or not. I don't know if she has anything going for her aside from the fact that she's the Princess Royale. She's next in line to the throne. She, in my opinion, is painted as very attractive. Her hair is nice. She has great features. She has a small waist, like all those things that stereotypically define an attractive royal figure. But the one thing she is really good at is dancing. I guess 17 years worth of practice will do it for you. So she is the one who is teaching the girls how to dance. They don't see much of Keeper. He basically welcomes them in. They get to the pavilion, and oftentimes like a certain kind of dance, like if it requires props, it will be waiting for them. There is this unseen band that can play whatever kind of music they want. They're just going about their daily business until they realize there's no way that they're gonna be able to continue mending these slippers. They wear their boots. I guess it's some kind of hard-soled work boot. They decide to wear these dancing because even though they're poor, they are still princesses and they are not about to dance barefoot. I'm like, you know what? At least I know what's good for my feet. Then the next day they arrive at breakfast, and people have already been noticing the fact that they're tired, they're not showing up for things on time, so people are talking. And then the king had been away. There's a war, so he'd been away fighting. They had no communication with him, but this is not seen until the war ends, and finally he comes back home. Now he's very attentive, but they have no relationship with him. They don't have warm and fuzzy feelings for him. And this is when I was like, ugh. So again, a very stereotypical relationship of like the hard, cruel father who doesn't care or understand his daughters, and then the loving mother. But then we get little pieces that, you know, it's not like it was a marriage of convenience. The mother actually loved the king. There's this dance called the Entwined, which is what the novel is named after, in which there is, it's like a scarf or something that they'll use, and they perform this dance, and he is trying to catch her. Azalea had watched them dancing the Entwined once in, you know, the private of their own ballroom. Her mother was like the best dancer there was, and for him to catch her, it was because she let him catch her, which obviously means she truly loved the guy. I thought Dixon did a much better job of defining these relationships and exploring these relationships towards the end, but her writing needed a lot of fine-tuning, in my opinion, to make it something worth investing in or being invested in. They show up at breakfast and they're all like limping because their feet hurt so much. They're covered in blisters and they're sore. Azalea, worst of all. Actually, no, what had happened was that the king had taken their shoes away because he didn't like the fact that they were dancing. She wouldn't tell him because she had sworn on silver, which she doesn't realize the magnitude that this has. It's more than just bonding, like it is magic, and it can prevent you from revealing things if you've sworn to them. I guess somehow the younger girls are sworn to it as well, so they can't tell him, and he just takes away their dancing shoes. Then they wear their boots, and when they come back, she has a heated argument with him, and she throws the fact that their mother would have wanted them to dance and this, that, the other, and he's like, don't ever talk to me about your mother. And this is an instance where I'm like, but why not? We don't know him well enough to know why he treats his daughters this way. We don't know why he doesn't want to talk about the mother. softies are like, I hope it's because he's mourning her. He loved her so much that it's painful for him to talk about her. But it's very one-dimensional. This is what I'm gonna have him say so that we're not gonna explore it further, and it's just gonna be that way until I decide that we're gonna talk about it again. But I'm not gonna have a better explanation as to why or how events happen. He throws their mother in his face. The next day or so, they have a delivery of new shoes. He tells Azalea, look, I'll let you dance. I will let you have shoes. I will resume the arrangement and having your shoes mended, but you will never talk to me about your mother again. And you won't let people know you dance, and you have got to be on time for things. It's not that those are bad stipulations, but I'm constantly asking why, which I've mentioned. It's not a bad thing that we're asking why, but Dixon really has no intention of explaining these things to us. It's not like she created questions that we didn't realize we had, but that she was building up to an answer toward. We just needed more backstory. We needed more depth and layering. Anyways, they're continuing to dance and they're having a great time. But then Keeper starts getting kind of creepy and they're losing things. There was a particular moment where Keeper really creeped Azalea out. It was not a red flag to her. She didn't, from that moment on, start like watching him more closely or questioning things or questioning whether this was a good idea for them to continue dancing in the secret pavilion. Then this is what really got me. They've started bonding with their dad a little bit more. He has taken them all out for a horseback ride. So they're back at the stable, and I don't know, like in my head, because this is one of those moments where I was like, how did I get from A to B? In my head, they find this brooch in the saddlebags of their father's horse. But I think what it actually was perhaps their mother had put it in her own saddlebags and they were hanging and one of the girls found this brooch. So they're all excited because they're under the impression that he's locked all of her things away or he's gotten rid of all of her things. So they are just loving the idea that they have something of their mother's. And then he's like, no, I want that. Like, you cannot have that. They convince him that they will be very careful with it. We all know where this is gonna go because they've been losing things. All of a sudden it goes missing. Azalea, because she's sworn to Silver, can't actually tell him what's happening or what happened, but she has a pretty good idea that he knows what's going on. There's also a moment where Keeper tries to steal Mr. Bradford's watch. My only guess here is that he is trying to get a piece of every girl, and then by having this brooch, he can also have a piece of their mother. There was something in me saying maybe her illness came from her also discovering him and making a pact. Maybe the beginning of her marriage, she couldn't have kids, you know, like a Rumpelstiltskin kind of thing. Maybe she made a pact with him and he blessed her or whatever her with magic, and then she didn't fulfill her end of the bargain or something, and that's why she ended up dying. That's not it at all, but that was how I was explaining things away because it was far more interesting than whatever I was being given. When he tries to steal Mr. Bradford's watch the first time, it's like it falls, and then all of a sudden they can't find it, and Keeper has it. And Azalea's like, can you give that back? Kind of like he acts like because he found it, it was his. Well, it's not like they left it behind. They just dropped it. And somehow he was able to get it. But he has all these really odd behaviors. So before the brooch goes missing, Mr. Bradford's watch goes missing. And I'm just like, why are these girls so terrible at keeping up with their things? My rational side that is wanting to get explanations is that Keeper is stealing these things. He's not finding them because he does eventually say, you know why I'm called Keeper, right? Because I keep things. But my thought is that he's stealing all these things from these girls, unless they're really that big of idiots, which I wouldn't know because they have no true personalities. Like, I don't know who they are. Then they all get back to their room one night, and Azalea's like, where's the watch? They are like, oh my gosh, we don't know. We must have left it. So she goes back to the pavilion, and Keeper's like, yeah, I've got it. They make a pact because he reveals that he only has the strength that he has because a magical object must have been damaged or broken to a certain extent so that he was able to kind of come back to life, in a sense. He had told them that he was part of the High King Deeth's court, that he was banished because of love. And they're like, well, what do you mean? He tells them a story about how he made an oath and he drank blood. And they're like, what does that have to do with love? And he's like, it was the girl I loved, it was her blood. To which Azalea is like, I know a story like this, and it involved the High King Deeth drinking a young woman's blood. Are we not putting these pieces together that Keeper is the High King Deeth? Like, she's kind of a moron, in all honesty. So she goes, she tries to get the watch back, and he makes a pact with her. He's like, you can have this watch, but you have got to find that last magical object that is keeping me here, and you have to destroy it. She and her sisters are under the impression that it is this magical tea set that they all loathe because it's something of a nasty tea set. Like, it'll snap at you and it'll burn you with hot tea, or I don't know, like it just plays nasty little tricks. It's not very nice. Clover reveals that one time when she was sick, they had brought her this tea set, and she was so angry at it that she broke it to pieces with a fire poker and like tossed it in the river or something. So all they could find were the sugar tongs. The sugar tongs had last been with them when they first discovered this passageway. So they're looking all over the pavilion and all over like the castle for these sugar tongs, and they cannot find them. He gives them an indeterminate amount of time to be able to do this. When he really starts to creep them out and they're like, we shouldn't be here, they are like, forget it. We don't need the watch. We don't need any of our stuff. We're just gonna start pulling back and not gonna go see him. Around this same time, the king has put an ad in the paper for any gentleman who can discover where they have been going at night. We've already encountered this gentleman named Lord Teddy, who's kind of a Joker character where he's just really strange and he's not to be taken too seriously, but they don't like him because when they first encountered him, he was taking all of the pictures of their mother. And he had said he was doing it with the king's permission. So they don't like him because obviously they loved their mother and they hate the idea that anything to remind them of her is now going to be gone. He shows up, Fairweller shows up, all these other like nincompoops show up to try to solve the mystery, and the girls essentially just chase them all away. One day, they go to the pavilion. Keeper is rough and tumble. He's kind of had it with their games. He needs them, wants them to complete their end of the bargain. So he threatens Azalea, shows her the sugar tongs. He basically had them the entire time, so they were not the magical object. And the poor little tongs, as much as we're not supposed to like this tea set, like he had bent back all of its teeth. So it's really interesting how like one act can turn the tides of how you feel about something. I don't really know what the object is supposed to be that freed him in the first place. I guess it is the tea set, but then the only other two magical objects I can think of are this wraith cloak that turns you invisible when you wear it, and this sword, but there can't be anything magical about this decrepit sword. So after they get these sugar tongs, they go to the king. They finally let the truth out somehow, although Azalea has been sworn by Keeper, who, if you haven't figured out, he's the High King Deeth. She is unable to like give him full details about what Keeper wants. The king takes this sword, he unmagics the sugar tongs because they're essentially on their last leg anyways, like they're dying in a sense. So now Azalea gets this bright idea that she can use the sword to unmagic the passageway, and it doesn't work. So she goes to him, she asks why. She's like, why didn't it work for me? And he's like, because centuries of rulers have sworn on this sword, giving it much more power. So it won't work for you, but it will work for me because I'm in this line of kings who have sworn on this sword. One thing she does have is that little handkerchief that her mother had given her. It's not as powerful because it hasn't been sworn on so many times, but this is an object that she can use in certain instances, which is why it opens up the passageway. So if you haven't figured out, Mr. Bradford has also joined in this opportunity to find out where the princesses go. So he's there, he sees the way that Keeper treats Azalea, and I'm just like, Azalea, she absolutely cannot see the forest through the trees. It's very, very frustrating because she's an intelligent person, but for some reason Dixon has written her as very oblivious and helpless. Like, she's not doing anything for her sisters. She's not really taking care of them. She's just leading them into situations that nobody understands, and she can't protect them from it. She's completely powerless. We have these little side stories that Clover is in a secret relationship with Fairweller, and that Lord Teddy has fallen in love with Bramble. He wants to marry her, and the king has already given his approval. Azalea has no idea whether or not Bramble feels the same way, but she's incensed that the king would approve a marriage without Bramble's permission because he's always told Azalea he would never force her to marry someone that she wouldn't want to marry. We go through all of this stuff. They repair their relationship with the king. So Azalea's new pact with Keeper because they need Mother's brooch. And he was like, I know this is one thing that will make you keep your word. And the thing is, this brooch is one of those other objects. I'm like, he must have stolen it. But it made me very angry because they come back and they're in bed, and then she wakes up to basically her sister scrambling about trying to find something without waking anybody up. Her first thought is, oh, you've lost this brooch. And Keeper has seen this brooch because, again, it's another object that they had dropped and he had picked up for them. He was mesmerized by it. They're like, yeah, we lost it. And she's like, you didn't attach it to your dress? And they're like, I just put it in my pocket. I'm like, okay, I know. This is Dixon's plot device to make things worse. I can accept that. But these girls are so dumb. I had a hard time buying that they would be so careless with an object that means so much to them. Like, okay, your sewing thread, I get it. You lost it. Your glove, I understand. You misplaced it. But like, their mother's prized brooch that their father was adamant they not have, and then when he relented, he was like, you have to basically guard it with your life. It does not align at all. Let's hop to the end. Azalea, and this was really ridiculous. Azalea is angry at her father for something. I can't remember what it was. It doesn't really matter. She confronts him because he was gonna go get the sword repaired. She is furious with him. She's like, I'm gonna go get this sword repaired because this completely makes sense. Takes his horse from him and hops on it. And this is where I was talking about foreshadowing. She is so blinded by her rage that she rides across that bridge. Her horse, her poor horse, I felt terrible for the horse. I didn't care about Azalea. But her poor horse slips and they like slide down this embankment. She falls into the creek or the river or whatever it is. Can't find this sword, and she knows that it's broken. She knows that it's gone. And she's like, how could I have been such a fool? How could I have been so angry? And I'm like, I don't know, because I don't really know how you got into this state. I do not know what possessed you. It was erratic behavior that does not align with Azalea whatsoever. And she just felt like a petulant child a lot of the time. This is like that last straw that Keeper needed to come back to life and raise Cain. She passes out. When she wakes up, it's to a note from her sisters being like, hey, we went to the pavilion. I think at some point she had warned them and they're like, we're not gonna listen to you. This is where things got really fuzzy for me. The gist is Keeper tricks her into thinking that he is her mother because there had been one real scary dance moment where she was there by herself and her mother had appeared, lips sewn. It was really creepy and really cool, if only there'd been a point to it. But he pretends to be the mother. She like takes her mother somewhere to a room, some room, I don't know, because she's trying to get to the pavilion, but for some reason her handkerchief isn't working, so it just keeps leading her into like a storage room of some sort. She picks up an ornament, it shatters, and then it like reforms into something, and then her mother's there, and she tries to take her mother to safety, only to realize that it's Keeper. All this jumbled stuff, which somehow leads to her discovering that Keeper has locked her sisters into mirrors and that they're going to die there. She takes the handkerchief. What happened? There was something about her mother had been crying, so she took the handkerchief to wipe away the tears, only to essentially wipe away her mother's essence. And so she freaks out because she's like, I don't want to harm my mother. But really what it was destroying the facade that Keeper had put up. Whatever the deal is, she finds herself in the room with her sisters locked in the mirrors, and Keeper is taunting her, and I don't know, he like disappears or something, whatever. She's trying to rescue her sisters, and she realizes that if she puts her handkerchief to these mirrors, it can, I guess, provide warmth or something, or salvation to her sisters in these mirrors. But then Keeper appears or reappears. He's like, don't do that. And then he like grabs one of the sisters out of the mirrors. So, this was also, I didn't understand. So when she was with her mother, for some reason, she decided to wrap this silver handkerchief around a burning ember, which destroyed the handkerchief. I do not know how she got the handkerchief back. I rewound it. I still couldn't figure out how she got this handkerchief back. But anyways, who would appear but the king comes crashing through on his horse, Mr. Bradford, the prime minister, and then Lord Teddy. I think like Mr. Pudding, who is something of like a manservant for the king. They all come crashing through the windows on their gigantic horses. They rescue Azalea and this one sister. And then Azalea and her dad wrap the silver handkerchief around a fire poker and break all of the mirrors. Those mirror pieces come together to create the forms of the sister that had been locked in that mirror. And they're like on their last leg, their dying strength. They crack open the last mirror, and I'm like, there's two of you. A fire poker, okay, you're swinging it 10 times, but like not that big of a deal, folks. They're both exhausted. They are trying to get everything back together, only for Keeper to reappear, and he's re-magicked this entire castle. I don't know. Anyways, it's just really confusing. I'm so sorry that I'm doing such a poor job relaying this book, much less this scene to you. Then there is a fight with Keeper. I don't really get it, because this entire time that they're rescuing these girls, it's like he's just kind of standing off to the side. I don't know what is keeping him in check. He and Azalea get into a fight. I think they fall through one of those windows. When she comes to, she finds herself in the room filled with all of her sisters and all of their rescuers, and for some reason she's like showing off her gun skills, how she can spin it and twirl it and catch it. I'm like, okay, obviously this is Keeper. And one of the sisters is like, I didn't know you knew how to shoot a gun. And he's like, oh, I don't. At what point are any of these people saying, if she has no gun skills, how is she able to do this? This can't be her. She breaks into the room and she's like, that's a fraud. They prove to her dad who is who. Again, I have no clue what's going on here, but he is able to get up to the clock tower. The clock, which had been stopped ever since her mother's death, he restarts it, potentially killing her. He doesn't kill her, but her dad does come to the rescue, and he shoots the dad. Now that the dad, who is the major general, is gone, his blood oath is no longer binding him to the mortal realm. He like wastes away to nothing. Azalea is weeping over her dead dad's body. Oh my gosh. Her dead dad's body. She gets like really hot all of a sudden. I guess somehow she was imbued with magic, which then healed her father. And of course, by this time, I am rooting for her dad. He has finally proven himself. He wants his daughters to love him. They used to have a relationship. Why they lost the relationship, I have no idea, because this is not explained. But over the course of the novel, they have begun to reconnect and to love him. He was just misunderstood, which again, huge trope, this book was just not bad necessarily. It was hard to get to or get through by the end. But it left a lot to be desired. She brings him back to life. However, the story is that it was like an artificial wound. Like he had been protected by something. And she's like, you lost pints of blood. You absolutely died. That was not an artificial wound. We wrap up with him being fine and dandy. The Parliament has granted them the funds to restore their home, as well as to make repairs that had already been needed. In the meantime, they are staying at Lord Teddy's, who he's just kind of a bumbling idiot, and we've kind of grown to like him as well. His relationship with Bramble has come to light. They're able to have their happily ever after, and then Clover's relationship with Fairweller is brought to light, and the king is irate, and he fires him as the prime minister. I'm like, I don't understand why. If you're willing to let your one daughter marry this one guy without knowing if she reciprocates, like, why aren't you willing to let your other daughter be in a relationship with your prime minister, even though obviously it's reciprocated? They are also eventually granted the allowance of marriage. So these two girls are like turtle doves and love nests. There's a moment where they're trying to explain to the little sisters what it feels like to kiss. One of them equates it to dancing. One of the little ones is like, oh, but Azalea's great at dancing. And then they're all like, whoops, Azalea's never been kissed. And of course she's fallen in love with that one guy, but he's not been around. She's like, oh, I'm just gonna be an old spinster for the rest of my life. Only for her dad to come to her one day and be like, look, we gotta talk about some things. First off, what's his face is in the next room, and basically he wants to marry you. However, protocol dictates that he can't ask you to marry him because you are the Princess Royale, so you're gonna have to propose. And she's like, I'm not proposing, the man's supposed to propose. They have all those really stereotypical, like, does he, doesn't he moments, like, oh, he must not actually like me, like he must be in love with Bramble or something. They work through that, and then they're on their path to happily ever after. And I think my biggest issue here was I did not mind that Azalea had a romance, that she had a love story, because this is supposed to be something of a coming of age story for her. So it's natural that she would find a suitor. But Bramble and Clove, whatever her name is, like maybe Clove is Hunger Games, doesn't matter. They're inconsequential. They're very minor characters. Like, of the sisters, Bramble does make more appearances and have more lines, but Clover is just the pretty one who has a hard time speaking in public because she is the quintessential princess. Their love stories came out of nowhere. There was no development, there was no time. And that is just, I guess, my overall complaint. Too much was going on and not enough was developed. This book, it felt like a middle school or teenage girl just writing what she wants to happen without really knowing how to write what she wants to happen. That's all I have for you. My eyes are killing me, and this book, it was kind of painful to remember. So there you go. Try it at your own risk, and I'll see you next week. Bye.